Have you ever seen a moment so savage it rewrites the rules in real time in a Senate chamber buzzing with hostility? Joe Morelle tried to bury Pam Bondi with mockery and smug one-liners only to trigger a response so devastating it sent shockwaves across the nation as Bondi leaned in her voice colder, then steal one sentence, flipped the script, and left Morelle scrambling for cover. While the world watched stunned, are you watching this from homework? Or somewhere you never expected to see political? History may drop your location below, and don't look away, because the ending will leave you speechless. It began with rumor whispers moved through the polished marble corridors of the United States Senate, murmurs of a storm gathering, where there should have only been routine oversight. By dawn, the Capitol buzzed like a hive on the brink of swarming camera crews, clogged the hallways outside. The hearing chamber veteran journalists arrived early, holding on to the rumor that this would not be an ordinary session, but a day no one would forget. The hearing was billed as a straightforward review of pandemic relief management and federal transparency. Yet every staffer felt the temperature spike with something unspoken inside. The hearing room rows of mahogany benches were packed with lawmakers, aides, and analysts, each carrying the anxious stiffness of people who suspected history was about to change, but could not predict how. Pam Bondi, the sitting United States Attorney General, sat with her back straight, shoulders squared, her eyes unmoving. Even as the buzz built around her, Bondi was famous for her calm under pressure, for never letting her opponents see a flicker of uncertainty. Still, even she felt the tension coiling in the air, a chill that seemed to seep from the granite walls themselves. At the head of the panel, Joe Morelle, Democratic congressman and chair of the Oversight Committee, scanned the room with a predator's patience. In the days leading up to the hearing, Morelle had orchestrated a quiet campaign to isolate Bondi. He had convened strategy meetings with trusted allies, rehearsed loaded questions, and worked to press to frame the narrative and advance. The goal was as ruthless as it was clear: turn the nation's top law officer into a political punchline live on national television. The first ripple of drama started with the seating chart. Morelle had personally ordered that Bondi be seated alone at the center table, exposed, surrounded by skeptical lawmakers, and a semicircle of cameras, no staffer, no colleague at her side. Even her briefcase had to be left at security. When Bondi entered the room, a cluster of Democratic senators barely glanced at her, a practiced indifference that was almost as cutting as open hostility. Republicans, knowing which way the wind blew, kept their distance. No one wanted to be seen as Bondi's shield. On a day like this, outside, the press gallery hummed with speculation. Microphones jostled against one another. Why is the attorney general being called here, and why now? Barked one reporter, already streaming live. What does Joe Morelle know that we don't? Someone else replied. The question hung in the air, fanned by tweets and headlines. Bondi faces hostile panel. Will Morelle deliver a knockout blow? News feeds flash photos of Bondi arriving, lips pressed together, eyes cold, as still refusing to react to shouted questions about corruption, missing funds, and the real purpose of her appearance. The session was called to order. The noise fell instantly like the last note before a symphony begins. Morelle's voice filled the space measure, but Barb, this hearing will examine the distribution and oversight of pandemic relief funds, he said, glancing at Bondi with a calculated smile. Transparency and accountability are not just words, but promises the American people expect us to keep, especially when lives and livelihoods hang in the balance. Bondi's expression did not flicker. She folded her hands atop the table, ringless, fingers steady. But Morelle's words drew a response in the room. Several senators nodded, lips pressed. Then an aide passed a memo down the line, and no one dared look directly at Bondi. Morelle continued, I trust that all parties present will answer candidly, even when the truth is uncomfortable. His tone landed somewhere between warning and invitation, and the threat beneath it was obvious to anyone paying attention. From the back row, a whisper, he's going for the jugular. On her left, a junior Republican staffer scrolled notes, shooting nervous glances at his phone as if awaiting instructions. A reporter mouthed silently to a cameraman, watch Bondi's face. She won't break, but she might bite. The audience, physical and digital, was already primed for blood. Bondi's mind churned beneath her practiced composure. She knew the numbers by heart: billions distributed, tens of millions accounted for, compliance rates higher than any federal program in a generation. She also knew Morelle would not ask about compliance. He wanted spectacle, not answers. She caught the eye of a lone independent senator, a quiet nod passing between them, respect. But no rescue was coming. This was Bondi's battlefield, and she was outnumbered. The first question did not come. Instead, Morelle set the trap with an anecdote, one pulled from a newspaper op-ed about a failed relief application in upstate New York, a story that made Bondi's office look callous. By omission, Madam Attorney General, He began, how do you justify the heartbreak of those left behind? By a broken bureaucracy. He let the question hang, savoring the discomfort, waiting for the cameras. To capture Bondi's reaction, Bondi refused to blink. The heartbreak is real, Congressman. That's why oversight matters. That's why I'm here. Her answer was neutral, measured, and designed to give nothing away. But Morelle, press, you are here, yes. But are you here as a defender of the truth, or just as another official hiding behind talking points the country deserves more than platitudes this time? The Democratic senators murmured in approval. The Republican side said nothing. A buzz swept the room as Morelle's allies exchanged glances. It was clear now Bondi would not be allowed to skate through generic answers. Every response would be a battlefield, every word a potential headline in the press. Sensed that two fingers hovered over keyboards, ready blast a misstep across every feed in the nation. Outside, the rumor mill spun faster and ominous. Leak on social media hinted that the hearing was just the beginning. A major scandal could break today. Read one viral post. Watch the Bondi hearing something big is coming inside. Bondi gripped her pen a fraction tighter, bracing for next.
Salvo, she knew the game in a chamber, where politics always mattered more than policy. Spectacle was the real currency. Morelle was building suspense, painting Bondi as a symbol of everything broken while quietly daring her to break herself on live television. And as the minutes crawled by, the pressure mounted. Every eye on the dais, in the gallery, behind the lens of every camera waited for a single mistake, not just Bondi's reputation, but the credibility of the Justice Department, the future of oversight, and perhaps even careers on both sides hung by a thread. The tension was so thick it felt almost toxic. It had become clear to everyone present today was not about facts but about dominance. Would Bondi survive, or would Morelle finally deliver the political spectacle he had so carefully engineered? In that silence, Morelle set his notes aside, looked directly at Bondi, and for the first time allowed the bite in his voice to come through cold and personal. He was ready to begin the attack. And Morelle did not waste a moment. As the first seconds of the live broadcast ticked by, he leaned forward into his microphone, every gesture deliberate, his eyes fixed on Bondi with the sharpened edge of someone savoring the power of an audience. Attorney General Bondi, he began, his voice layered with mock courtesy. I trust you've enjoyed your time in the national spotlight. He allowed the phrase to hang, drawing out a ripple of knowing laughter from the committee's Democratic wing. The Senate chamber, so often a fortress of decorum, bristled with sudden electricity. Several senators exchanged glances, each one calculating how much of Morelle's performance to join. One older senator leaned back, lips curling into a smirk, nodding in approval at the show. Bondi sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, her posture impeccable, unreadable. Morelle pressed on, turning to the gallery of journalists crowding the back wall. It seems to me, he continued, voice rising just enough for the cameras to catch every syllable, that our Attorney General has mastered public relations far better than public responsibility. After all, it's one thing to stand in front of the cameras and claim victory over corruption, but quite another to answer for a mountain of missed oversight, isn't it? He didn't bother hiding the venom, now drawing scattered chuckles from the far end of the committee. The barbs worked, murmurs and suppressed grins spread across the rows of lawmakers as Morelle's words found purchase with the precision of a trial lawyer. He launched into specifics. Perhaps you can explain, he said, tilting his head as if speaking to a wayward child, how under your watch millions in relief vanished into thin air while families in my district were left with nothing but broken promises. He flipped a file open with a flourish, the papers landing on the table with theatrical finality. Or is this just another photo op, Madam Attorney General? His smile widened, almost predatory. A senator from the majority joined in, voice dripping sarcasm. Or maybe we should ask the real question, who actually runs your department, Miss Bondi? Or are you simply the face of someone else's agenda? This drew more than a few laughs, the mood of the room curdling from professional skepticism to something meaner, more performative. The cameras panned from Morelle's confident smirk to the stony set of Bondi's jaw, to the uneasy shuffle of her supposed allies. Bondi's eyes gave nothing away. Another senator, sensing the shift in the wind, interrupted, raising her voice just enough to be captured by the mics. This isn't personal, Pam, but you must admit your department's oversight has been less than inspiring. Even that half-hearted dig drew a few snickers from the press pit. From the back, a reporter whispered, they're going for blood. Morelle's allies, emboldened by the tide, added their flourishes, layering innuendo over half questions, making every answer a trap. Every accusation was calculated not to discover facts, but to push Bondi into a defensive crouch. It was less a hearing, more a public evisceration. The pressure in the room intensified with every jab. Another senator, eager to impress the chairman, raised her hand, and without being recognized, demanded to know how Bondi could look the American people in the eye after so many failures. A third rattled off a list of counties where relief funds had been delayed, misplaced, or misused, her voice rising with every charge. The aim was clear: make Bondi sweat, corner her with accusations so layered and relentless there would be no space to answer. Throughout the barrage, Bondi did not flinch, her fingers curled around the edge of the desk, nails pressing into it. She took in the room, the senators feeding off one another's cruelty, the gleeful buzz in the press section, her supporters staring intently at their notes, unwilling to meet her gaze. Every angle had been covered, every question was a loaded gun. Still Bondi sat in the crossfire, her silence amplifying the spectacle Morelle relished every second. So tell us, Madam Attorney General, he said, his tone now openly mocking, do you understand the mechanics of this job, or do you simply rehearse the lines written for you? The phrase landed like a slap. The laughter was louder now, with even a few non-committee staffers in the gallery unable to contain themselves. For a moment, the proceeding no longer felt like government oversight, but an orchestrated humiliation, a political ambush set to the rhythm of live broadcast and trending hashtags. Bondi's supposed allies, the handful of senators who might have spoken on her behalf, remained silent, eyes cast down, unwilling to risk the crossfire. One aide, his hands trembling, tried to slip her a note, but Bondi ignored it. In the din, she seemed alone in a room full of adversaries, every face turned toward her, waiting for a crack, a stumble, any sign of weakness. The barrage had become so ruthless, it almost bordered on toxic, each question designed to diminish her not just as an official, but as a person. Morelle pressed harder. We all know, he said, his voice softening in that particular way meant to sharpen the knife, that anyone can play the hero when the lights are on, but when the doors close, when accountability is demanded, can you claim to have done your job, or are you merely acting out a part for the cameras and leaving the real work for others? The implication was clear. Bondi was a fraud, a figurehead, nothing more than a well-rehearsed performance. A hush settled, heavy and expectant. Even the cameramen seemed to hold their breath, lenses trained on Bondi's impassive profile. Morelle's challenge hovered, his final words echoing off the paneled walls. Do you truly understand what you are doing here today, Ms. Bondi, or are you simply playing the part of a hero? The air vibrated with the promise of a dramatic response. In that instant, Bondi did not move, did not blink, her eyes sharpened, twin points of blue steel, unyielding even as the storm of ridicule threatened to swallow her whole. The room fell utterly silent, every ear straining